If you're not born in the US, but you work in tech in the US, this is the right video for you. Today is November 11th, 2022. It's been a crazy week with all the massive layoff by Meta and Stripe, and seems like more are coming. If you follow tech, you know that a lot of people working tech are not born here. They're here because of working visas such as H-1B or OPT. So when you have massive layoff like this, it's causing a lot of stress for people and their families. They are seriously under the risk of not being able to stay in the US legally. So today we're going to go over some of the most relevant topics. I have a conversation with Sophie Alcorn, who is one of the most esteemed immigration lawyer in Silicon Valley. We're going to go over what are the options for people who have been laid off or are worried about being laid off. What are different type of options or choices you have for you and your family? We're going to go over each of them. You can choose which one is the best for you. In addition to that, we're going to talk about startup as well. So if you're somebody who works in tech, being employed right now, but you always want to start a company, you feel like right now is the time, but you don't have a green card yet, what are your options? We're going to go over some of the special type of green card as well as special type of visa that enables you to do that. So it's really highly relevant topic for people who are foreign born, work in tech. So if you know any friends who are like that, please share this video if you find it helpful. Finally, I'm Xiaoyin Chu. I recently started this channel. My day job, I'm a founder. I've been a founder for 3 years. Before that, I was a product manager at Meta. I'm personally was born and raised in China, immigrated here. So this topic is very personal to me. I just recently started this channel because I feel like a lot of changes happening in the past few months. Especially for someone working tech, I feel like it's time to have honest conversations. So this is the channel that I just started. If you like any of the content, please subscribe. It means a lot to me because I'm just starting out. Okay, let's cut to the chase and get started. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. This is Xiaoyin Shu, and today I have a really special friend, Sophie, joining me. Sophie is the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today, Cheyenne. It's so great to be here with you.
Yeah, in fact, you're my lawyer, so it's fun that we're now interviewing. That's awesome. Do you want to talk about what do you do as a firm?
At Alcorn Immigration Law, we help startup founders and growing tech companies that need brilliant engineers and other professionals in the United States. We help them get permission to live and work and stay legally in the country. And we do that by getting visas and green cards and work permits for people. So we're a law firm. We help hundreds of startups, brilliant founders like yourself, and teams, VCs, and families.
Heavy topic right now. Everyone has following the layoffs, especially with Meta, Stripe. What have you seen in the past week? Layoffs?
Oh, it's been madness. People are very scared. Basically, tens of thousands of people have been laid off in the tech sector. 10-15% at least are on non-immigrant working visa statuses like H-1B or O-1. There's a bunch in the alphabet soup, and it's like before you get a green card. And if you're in that position, you have 60 days from the day you were laid off to find a new job, get a new immigration status, or leave the country. And a lot of the individuals who are affected have U.S. citizen children who go to neighborhood public schools, and their spouse is a working professional who's also very talented and whose work authorization is dependent on the primary spouse. And so I think a lot of families are really scared right now.
Personally, I was going through the same exact process. So like, what are there any options that those people can have? I know that, like, for example, Facebook, that you stay employed for 3 months or something. Does that mean they can keep their status for 3 months? Or
it's risky with the immigration service because even the 60 days is discretionary by the government. They don't have to give it to you, and you don't know until the end when you're already applying for a new job or a new status. And also, there's a question about what is the last day of work and when do the 60 days start. And the conservative approach is to start from November 4th or whenever you actually got the notice that you were laid off, even if you're still going to get pay stubs for 3 more months, because obviously the government is going to be very aware of everything that's happening. And it's not like you're just the one random person who still has January pay stubs and you can just submit the 3 most recent ones and hope that nobody asks when your last day was and if it was more than 60 days ago. So I think the conservative approach is for everybody to find a new solution within 60 days of that layoff notice. And there are options. The thing that I'm encouraging most people to do, so if you're married and your spouse also has their own H-1B, you could go into an H-4 dependent status through your spouse while you look for a new job if you can't find one in 60 days. But the other option is you can file a change of status from your work visa status to B1, B2 visitor, to request 6 months to hang out, look for a job, meditate, work out, go to Disneyland, be a tourist, live off your savings. You can't work, but you can look for a job. And then the other thing I'm seeing people do is like 25% of the people laid off are fed up with corporate and they want to be startup founders, and the talent's there. Yeah. And I think the thing for immigrants is they're like, how do I stay in the country if I'm a founder? And so the thing I want people to know is 6 months is enough time for somebody who's highly motivated to go from a smart professional to qualified for an O1 visa for extraordinary ability, because I've seen people hustle and get those accomplishments, like writing articles, judging competitions, getting letters of recommendation. And with an O visa, then somebody could be a startup founder instead of looking for another big tech job.
Oh, that's really interesting. Maybe we can talk a little bit deeper on those options. So one, you mentioned that option number one would be like leveraging your spouse. So you have to be married to
yeah.
I see.
Probably don't marry somebody just because you could be a dependent on their visa status. And if you are going to marry somebody just for immigration, probably make more sense to find a U.S. citizen. But it should only be a good faith marriage.
So as an H-4, can you still work?
Some H-4s can work. If the primary H-1B spouse has reached certain milestones in the PERM and I-140 process, then the H-4 spouse is eligible to apply for a work permit. So a lot of the families where there's an H-1B holder who got laid off, their spouse is on H-4 and has a work permit. And if that primary person doesn't get a new H-1B transfer filed by their 60th day, it would be most prudent for their spouse to stop working as well, because the spouse's H-4 and work permission is technically dependent on the person being in H-1B status. So this is really, it's going to have a big ripple effect for a lot of people's families and lives.
So if that doesn't work out, then you go get a traveler's visa. That's the B1.
Yeah, and you all stop working and you just stay here until the main spouse finds a new H-1B job.
Okay, what if you don't have a spouse, then by yourself?
Then you become a visitor or an O1.
So then you can do everything by staying in the country and process everything.
As long as you get the thing filed before the end of the 60 days, you can wait here while the government is still making a decision.
And the hope is that within that 6 months, you will be able to get a job, and then in that case, you would just transfer to H-1B.
And then they could reactivate your H-1B and transfer you back.
Exactly. I see. What if you were not on H-1B? You were in some OPT or STEM extension. How does that work? There
are maximum numbers of days of unemployment on each of those. I believe it's 60 and 90 days. So you're on a clock to find a new job as well. The nice thing about regular OPT in the first year is that you can be an unpaid volunteer and maintain your status. So it's a little easier. For STEM OPT, you need at least a 20-hour-a-week job that pays at least minimum wage somewhere that can do your training plan.
But it doesn't need to be in tech, right? The STEM extension.
No. It has to be related to whatever you studied, but the job itself doesn't have to be in the tech industry, but there has to be some connection, and there has to be a good faith effort that you're going to be somehow learning something that will advance what you studied.
But you're saying that can be a part-time, like,
that can be a part-time. Yeah, it can be a part-time. You can find something.
Okay, which may not be ideal for most people.
Right.
Obviously. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the option that you mentioned that's really sounds like more flexible is the O1 or EB1. Yeah. Maybe let's take a step back and explain like why. So you mentioned about writing can be really helpful. Why is that really helpful for O1 and EB1?
Oh, okay. So there's these two special categories in the world of work visas and green cards. The US government in the 60s or something decided that if somebody is at the very top of their subfield of work in their country or in the world, that we just want them in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so there's an O1 visa for that, and then there's an EB1 green card, and they have somewhat similar requirements. And if you want the visa, you can get it in about 3 to 6 months. If you want the green card, it's probably going to take more like 2 to 3 years at this point. I think it was faster when you went through it, but visas for 3 years. The green card is basically for lifetime. You get your card and it lasts 10 years at a time. The beauty of these categories is you don't need to depend on some company to sponsor you. You can sponsor yourself. You can set them up so that you can do any types of work you want. So you can start your own company. You can start multiple companies. You could be an advisor to startups in your friends' companies, be on the board. You could get equity. You could get paid for consulting work. You could get paid as a speaker. You could be a venture scout for a VC firm. So there's so many types of gig work and income streams that people in this field would love to avail themselves of. But if you just have a normal H-1B, you're only supposed to work for one company that sponsored you. So they're really valuable to have, and they're relatively hard to get, but completely possible as well. And there are 8 to 10 categories, and you have to show that you meet at least 3 of them. And we do that through letters of recommendation and printouts of articles and websites. And some of the categories that lots of startup founders tend to be qualified for include: have you won awards like a grant from your country's government or a venture capital award from a big VC firm? Or have you been a part of any associations? Were you in YC or On Deck or Founders Network that are hard to get into? Have you been a judge at competitions like hackathons and pitch competitions? Have you written articles in Forbes or the journal for your profession in your home country? And did reporters write articles about you? And what's the value of your equity? And what have you created or invented? So we don't need all of those. We only need 3 or 4 usually. And then you can get the status. But it's a big process because we're generating hundreds of pages of paper with these really complicated applications, and we're doing legal arguments explaining why you're the best of the best. And I think a lot of people freak out because if you're not, I mean, in America, it's like fake it till you make it. You're a superstar. Everybody gets a trophy. Tell us how awesome you are. Self-promotion, but that can be really intense for people who were raised in cultures that value humility. So that can be one of the challenges as well.
I guess some of the stuff you mentioned were maybe for founders. How about let's say if you work at Facebook or Google? I mean, let's say if you're a product manager or engineer at Facebook or Google, either you're laid off or not, but you just want more flexibility to get this special talent.
Yeah.
So how do you position yourself to be?
If you're working there already, it's a little bit tougher, but you can do it. And some of the things that we can do are tie in press coverage of your product that you created to show that you created this thing that hundreds of millions or billions of people use. And especially if you can be the spokesperson and get interviewed in the newspaper coverage about the company's product, that can be really valuable. You can get letters of recommendation from your manager. Whether your manager will be willing to write that on company letterhead or not is another question, but even they can write it on their own personal letterhead. But usually people in that situation need to rack up the accomplishments without starting another business because they can't start another business yet. It becomes a lot of like writing, judging competitions, doing stuff that's compatible with your day job.
So let's say if you're senior engineer at Google or Facebook, if there's some engineering blog, maybe you wrote one day about how to build something, because that will count as publication?
Yes, and if it gets published on the Google blog, that could help. Likewise, if you contribute to open source projects and that gets distributed, we could use that. Sometimes the big tech companies will file patents, and if your name is on the patents, that can be super helpful. For some people with advanced engineering education, they've done peer-reviewed scientific publications in journals, so we can use that. And also in January, the government wanted to make it easier for foreign-born STEM talent to qualify for O1s. So they actually lowered the threshold for people in the sciences and engineering to get O1s. And they're like, for example, if you want to show that you invented something, you don't need a full approved patent anymore. You can show that you have a pending patent, and that will work now. So they tried to make it a little bit easier, which is nice.
So can you explain to the audience what is different between O1 and EB1 in terms of the flexibility?
Yeah. So Well, an EB1 is just a green card and you get a work permit on the way. And so you can do whatever you want and you're supposed to work in your field. But if you're like, oh, I'm Leonardo da Vinci and not only do I paint the Mona Lisa and sculpt, but I also invent flying machines, you would be able to switch from painting to flying machines on an EB1. But in an O1, you're supposed to stick to your field. It's only good for 3 years. You have to keep renewing it. So for most people, it's like a stepping stone to show that they're extraordinary and they can start working towards that green card.
So does that mean that you're still free to work on your own as long as you work?
You can be self-employed through an agent on an O1. You need to have somebody else petition for you, but it doesn't have to be a company. It can be a tech talent agency. So we do that a lot for people. There's one in particular that we can use that will sponsor people's visas for tech.
If you have someone petition for you, then you can get an O1. You can just work in the US, is it forever or just for a certain period of time?
3 years at a time, but you can renew it until you die. So if most people think it's a headache to renew it every 3 years and they would like a green card. Some people, if they know that they're going to have some income event where they're trying to not have to pay US income taxes for the rest of their life, like that could be a reason why they don't want a green card and they just want an O1, and then they work closely with their tax advisor to figure out how much time they can spend in the country every year and work here on their visa, but not be considered a resident here for tax purposes. I don't know, that's outside of my lane, but people do it.
I guess maybe back to the previous topic on, let's say if you're laid off, what are your options? It sounds like O1 or EB1. Either of them could work. Right?
Yeah, they could. So for somebody who's already qualified, yeah, you could file both an O1 and an EB1 in your 60-day grace period and just be done with the whole employer dependency thing. For many people, it takes them several more weeks to gather or create all the accomplishments. So you could bridge it both together. You could have your 60-day grace period, and then you could do a change of status to B1 business visitor so that you could be here for another 6 months. And then within that 6 months, you write articles and publish them and get media coverage and stuff. You can't work. But then before the end of that 6 months, you could file a change of status to O1 as well as your green card. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's really fast. And how long does it take for you to know, okay, you get it or not? Is it really fast?
Oh, God, I wish it was fast. Okay, so here's the nuts thing. This change of status to B1 to request 6 months of additional stay in the US as a visitor. Sometimes the government can take 7 or 8 months to make the decision. So the decision might not even come until after the entire 6 months you requested is all done. And that can be very frustrating for people, but you're allowed to stay here and you're allowed to change to another status. And as long as one day everything gets approved, then looking backwards, there's a connection between each chunk of time, then you're allowed to stay.
So in other words, you're saying you get a B1, B2 for 6 months, and then end of the 6 months, you do this particular
change of status to O1.
And then you just wait in the US for another 6 months. Hopefully the government will get back to you. So that's 1 year, right? Since the beginning of your B1, B2.
Could be, yeah.
But then for that 6 months, you cannot work either, or you could.
Once you're O1, if you're changing to an O1, you can use premium processing and it has to be approved, and then you're allowed to start working in O status.
But if you're waiting for the result, then you still can't work, right?
Correct, unless it's an H-1B, and then you're allowed to work as soon as the new company files, as long as you were in H-1B.
This is pretty complicated
stuff. It's so freaking complicated. And the people that have to deal with this system often weren't taught English as a first language, right? So there's so it's really intense. And then you wonder why there's so many undocumented people in the United States, but it's because the system is so impossible to navigate that it takes like Stanford, Harvard, MIT people to try to figure out how to do it legally.
That's crazy. So it sounds like there's some updates this year. Is it like a very normal thing that every year there's some new updates on the policy side? What are the newest updates?
It's so fickle. It changes with every presidential administration, and then the lawmakers are always trying to change the laws, but not. So I don't know. But yeah, the current Biden-Harris administration is generally theoretically favorable to immigrants. They're trying to clean up all the Trump era backlogs for processing time. They've tried to make it a normal standard. The Trump administration was doing extreme vetting for everybody, which was really intense, but they've tried to make it like normal again. But there's still a lot that they haven't done. They're just really like preserving the status quo and trying to clean things up a little bit. But the fate of dreamers on DACA is still uncertain. There hasn't been any new actual immigration law in 20 years. So it's a very slow moving process. But yeah, they can come out with new memos and new regulations and new interpretations. And so that can change things slightly. So this thing for STEM is pretty good. The government thinks that fixes startup immigration, but we have a long way to go actually to make it an even playing field for people.
So there's some kind of bill that I heard about entrepreneurs and having special visa. Is that still a thing, or that's
Yeah. So I got to help write that, and it was passed by the House of Representatives. It's called the Like Act, and it was let immigrants kickstart entrepreneurship. And it passed almost a year ago in the House of Representatives, and they were trying to get it through the Senate in the CHIPS bill for STEM research funding, but it's too controversial, and the political lobbyists chose their teams after September 11th, 2001, and they decided they like brokered some peace, as in, if we're going to get immigration reform through, it has to have XYZ, all these different groups of people have to be included in a certain way, and we're all going to get it through together, or none of us are going to get it through. So there's like this big stalemate. And so if the tech people want their startup thing to get through, then it's upsetting for the people who want to help children or farm workers or asylum seekers or factory workers, which of course are all really important things, but also startup founders create jobs, pay tons of taxes, create technologies that keep America safe and save the planet, right? It's all tied together, and the people with these entrenched interests don't want to split it up. So it's very slow and challenging to make any sort of change.
I see. So the other things that are tangled are nothing to do with tech. It's just became an overall.
It's just that it's immigration. All of immigration got lumped together. So like the 10 or 15 or 20 million undocumented immigrants and what will happen to them, and crime on the US-Mexico border and gangs and drug violence. Like, people just think, oh, it's immigration, it must be bad. Put it all there. So they don't realize how many amazing things immigrants also contribute to the United States. And so maybe this layoff situation will be a wake-up call on who are immigrants in the United States and what do they contribute.
Yeah.
But it's very political, and it's been for decades. And it's just this very convenient political thing where it's like the scapegoat of politics. It's like the one thing that Democrats and Republicans can all agree on is they don't want immigration to happen. And it's like, wait a minute, why couldn't you just make that the one thing you can agree on? It's good for everybody. There's help the children and create more business in the United States. So maybe one day.
That's really unfortunate. It sounds like there's not going to be any result anytime soon.
We're trying. So I'm working with the National Venture Capital Association and their lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and they are very pro-immigration, because even though the VCs, there's 500 VC firms in the country that are members, and even though they're all like very independent, like lone wolf type of people, a lot of them actually really care about startup founders and immigration, because they realize how much value their portfolios have that are created by immigrants. So there's a huge economic incentive for them to support immigration and humanitarian, personal. They get it. They know immigrants. It's just normal here in Silicon Valley. So they're working hard, and we're collaborating with them. There might be an opportunity in January for them to get another law through, but it depends on how this November election shakes out. And since we're recording this podcast 2 days after the election, and I still don't know who has control of the Senate. So it's too early to tell based on the time of this recording what the outcome will be. But maybe there's a chance there's hopefully going to be some sort of startup bill, and they would like to try to include immigration in it again. So I don't know when you're going to air this episode, but I am collecting stories of aspiring startup founders and people who are startup founders and who want to talk about the immigration hell that they went through. I would love to, anybody, please reach out with me. Please share your stories. The lawmakers in Washington really need to hear from you, because to them it's very abstract. Oh, we're going to let in the immigrants and they're going to help the economy. But I want to be able to say, look, Republican senator in West Virginia, this person has a coal-related carbon capture technology. They would like to put it in your district. It will create 3,000 jobs for Americans in the factory, and it will reduce global warming, or whatever the thing is. Those detailed stories really help make sense for people in their minds when they're thinking about these things.
I see. This is really helpful. I'm also really curious about, it sounds like you're working on something technology related too, in addition to the law firm. So can you talk to me more about how does that work?
Just starting with very simple technology, but realizing that there's a huge opportunity for better technology in the legal field, especially related to the immigration process. I'm an entrepreneur. I founded this law firm. We have a team of about 25 people, and it is hard running a professional services business in a digital world. Law is one of the most antiquated industries next to construction, and there's a lot of really smart people who I've had the opportunity to work with, but the type of jobs I've been able to provide is like copying and pasting from one software to another. So it's not really the highest use of human potential, heart, mind, brain. It's not like the interesting work where I get to help you brainstorm on how you're going to get an O1 and where you're going to be able to get the articles published and what connections can we call to help you make it happen and what does this mean for your family or whatever. There's a lot of grunt work, and we're looking at ways that we can help make that easier, faster. So step one is just doing some basic stuff to improve our client experience at Alcorn.
I'm also kind of curious about when we try to schedule this interview. It sounds like we have very different schedule. I'm a very night owl. It sounds like you have a really early schedule. You get up at 4. Is that true?
Yeah. If I lived in a cave and never saw daylight, I think I would have a non-24-hour biorhythm. Like the 24, I feel like I'm on 26 hours or something. Like I have a little bit more energy than time in the day. So I would always like to stay up later and later. Or I could just actually be a night owl, but I've never had a chance to express it because I've always been in some sort of hyper-structured law school, then becoming a mom, whatever thing. But I couldn't sleep consistently. And I was going to bed some nights at 2 a.m., but then I would have to wake up for work. And then the next night I would like crash at 7:30 or something. So about a year ago, I just decided I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. every single day, no matter what, no break for weekends. And my sleep schedule, sounds like for a baby, my sleep schedule, but it finally became normal. And I actually get tired in the evenings now. And it's been about a year, but the weird thing is now I'm waking up earlier, and I really love that peaceful part where it's still dark outside and the world isn't awake yet, but I'm refreshed. And I also love that if I stay up until 2 or 3 a.m., that's fun too. But it's different being awake versus being tired at that time.
Yeah.
So it was funny scheduling this because we just had the time change. But before that, I was waking up at 4:45 with no alarm, just because. And I was getting sleepy and going to bed at 8:30 at night. I get like an hour to myself in the morning, and I got a treadmill. So I run on the treadmill, and then I drink coffee, and then I can think about, there's this really great book called The One Thing. And it's like, what's the one thing that you can do that makes everything else easier or not matter anymore? And before if you just wake up and race into your meeting, you don't even have a chance to think about how you want to live your life that day. But I love having those moments in the morning, and then I can meditate too. And like, oh, how do I want to spend this day on earth? Which you never know, could be the last one, right? So what would make this day well lived? How can I actually move things forward in a way that has like a geometric progression of growth to make things better? Yeah, I really am liking the early morning, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I could go to bed even earlier and have even more time for myself in the morning.
Yeah. What's your support network like right now? I know you have your own firm, you have a lot of people that you're hiring, and you also have kids. So what's your support network like for you right now?
I am so into this like founder journey thing right now. A lot of my friends are people like you, like super brilliant, talented, motivated, and really sprinkled like all over the world. And it's a lot of the weird friendships where the bond gets stronger even though you don't actually spend any time with them in real life day to day somehow. But I also have several lovely friends here. My family lives in Southern California, single mom, kids are with me half the time. So I've tried various after school care things when I needed to work, or I had the fortune to have a nanny from time to time, which was helpful, especially when they were littler. For a while, I had like help me with household chores, but I'm not doing that right now. But I do have help to clean my house. So I try to help people who can help me where I can. I certainly can't do it all, but I just get really excited by ideas and building things. And so when I'm not with my kids or doing the like 9 to 5 of the law firm, I'm always trying to build or create or write something. So it's fun.
What are some of the books other than the one thing that you've been reading lately?
I have been reading the Bhagavad Gita, which was like an ancient Sanskrit epic poem, which is really beautiful, about Arjuna and Krishna. And so it's like one of the world's amazing spiritual texts. I've been reading a lot of startup books lately, like Blitzscaling and The One Thing, and like the book The Founders, which is about the PayPal mafia. So I've been reading Paul Graham essays. Before that, I was reading like a lot of ancient mystical, religious, spiritual texts. But now I'm in my like startup education.
That's a big shift.
Yeah. You're going to have an identity shift, and before you can make space to learn the new thing, you have to clean out all the old stuff that no longer serves you. So I think a lot of the spiritual stuff was to like release the idea of myself that I thought I was supposed to have as I am a lawyer. I will help you. It's a very narrow identity, and it's very strict and professional and old fashioned. And that's not how the future is. Like, I think when my kids are adults, it's going to be everybody's like a micro entrepreneur. You have 17 different things going on. It's all through some super app. Like, you work on projects together with co-founders when you feel like it. You make money when you need it. You rest when you don't. So I think it's going to be a lot more fun for them, but we're like making that transition from like our parents' generation or their parents of working in one job in one company loyally until you're 65, and then you have your retirement party, and then you're successful or something.
This is really fun chatting. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. It's super fun and really informative.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Xiaoyun.